Okay. I mean, one of the things I do is I study history. 500 years ago, the Norwegians were in Greenland and had a population of at least 5,000 there. Why were they in Greenland? Because it was warm. Right? The climate was much warmer than it is today. This is when Leif Erikson discovered America, even though he wasn't the first Norwegian here. We know he was in Newfoundland 1,000 years ago because they've done excavations and they found all kinds of Norwegian artifacts, even lutefisk, believe it or not. Well,
Alan, I didn't ask you about that. I asked you about light rail. I didn't ask you about
But
I want to know how it fits into your graph.
Wait, just
and where your priorities are.
Just give me time. So anyway, I want you to know the carbon dioxide stuff, I think, is totally bogus. All right. I'm an environmentalist in a good sense. Now let me be explicit. I personally own, and this is why I would always win the debates with the environmentalists. I personally own 3 wetlands. Okay? Please don't tell a duck hunter that. Which I have purchased with my own money, not 1 penny of government subsidy. And why? And I protect them. Okay? Why? Because I love the world that God gave us. No government subsidy, it's just I like doing it. And I always challenge the environmentalists I debate with, show me something that you personally have sacrificed for the environment. And they never have anything, see? So I would say, look at my record. I mean, I'm the guy. All right. So, I'm an environmentalist in a good sense, but, you know, I mean, it's unfortunately the term has come to mean what the greenies wanted to mean, and of course I have no time for that. Light rail, my position has always been the same. Build it. As long as there's no government subsidy, and as long as property rights are protected. Okay, anybody wants to build light rail, you do it, but it's your investment. Okay, does that mean that light rail is going to be built? Maybe some places, Chicago or New York or something, I don't know, not in Minnesota. It's always been my position on light rail. Now, again, though, let's keep in mind what the issues are. The issues are we are in a crisis of overspending, out of control, federal spending. That is where we are. Now, does it make sense when you have this kind, I mean, if you're going to prioritize, does it make sense to prioritize light rail? No, it does not. Okay? It does not. Unless somebody can develop something new that I haven't seen. So it's one of those things, you know, keep your eye on the prize. We sink or swim as a country primarily on this. It's also a huge national defense issue. I mean, how do you have a strong national defense if you have an economy that's in the tank? So this is the big one. Other questions, Terry? Terry first, then. Go ahead, Terry.
You had commented it's costing 20% to service this debt we have.
That's the interest.
And the thing that I keep thinking is we have ridiculously low interest rates now.
Right.
I'm wondering what would the impact be if the interest rates, for example, tripled, which really wouldn't be terribly
Unusual.
unusual, correct, but it certainly would have an impact on that amount.
Well, you know, I mean, let's be blunt. Given the trajectory here, we're 5 years away from being where Greece is today, even at the very low interest. Okay? 5 more years of this, and our debt to GDP ratio is right with the country of Greece. I mean, we are facing a crisis, and we absolutely have to turn this around. And that is why I am here instead of in my fishing boat. I love fishing. Yes, sir.
With that kind of debt, you know, there are things that need to be cut, need to be left out, need to be thrown out. And again, you talk back to the priorities, and that's good. But if you're at any level, you know, you're going to reach a point somewhere where you may end up a diminishing returns of just cutting. Now, all of us at one time have.
Excellent,
more or less
excellent
said,
question.
You know,
Yeah.
we gotta have a little more money.
Yeah.
Either a tax here, on gas for infrastructure for roads.
Right.
On, different types of things like that. So at what point, what priorities do you set? I mean, do we take grams and throw her out, or, I love my mother,
Yeah.
but and if she has to live with me, my God, she'll have to live with me. It's probably harder on her.
Well, let me give a couple of examples, but first the overview. Up until about 2003, 2004, something like that, the government was spending 18% of the gross, the federal government was spending 18% of the gross domestic product. And it had been doing that for quite a few years. It was in the early 2000s when that started to skyrocket, and we're now up to spending 24% of the gross domestic product. I believe we can and must get back down to 18% level. Okay, and you do that two ways. You unleash the energy of private enterprise through economic growth, but you also have to shrink government at the same time. And you can do that without damaging the economy, because the private sector will see, okay, here's the green light, we can invest. So I think I like that 18% number. But again, going back to the chart of the sled and how much weight can you have in the sled and still roll pretty well. I think history has shown that 18% federal government is where the sled can keep going pretty well. 24%, we aren't going to do it. So that's the way I see it. And I think that's a pretty sensible type of approach. Now, what can you cut? Let me give a couple other examples. Mankato Free Press a couple of weeks ago had an article on a research project north of Grand Rapids, Itasca County. $50 million, now in my book that's real money, being used on a research project to study the effects of global warming on the peat bogs of Minnesota. I think that is a very low priority item, okay? And could we zero that out without it affecting our quality of life and our environment? My answer is yes, we can. Okay. So the problem is that project, $50 million to study the effect of global warming on peat bogs, that is a microcosm of what our government is doing. There are thousands of loony projects like this out there. And I think the only way to cut them is you have to have a limit, because then you have to prioritize. So I think the limit in prioritizing is just about everything. That's what I'm in concrete on.
But how do you foster cooperation with people if you call everything that you don't like loony for them?
Well,
I mean,
it's...
you gotta live with those people too.
People know me as being very explicit, very direct, but totally trustworthy. And the reason I can work with people and the reason I can form coalitions